People who take psychedelics with strangers at high dose do come back with wild tales to tell, but I don't think you can do that over and over again without having some horrible thing befall you. My mind is not, some people seem more resilient. I am not. People often ask me to trip them. And I won't, and it's not because of concern for the legal system or the fact that I am not licensed for psychotherapy or any of that. It's because I can't stand it when people come apart on psychedelics. I am, if you're interested in this subject or if you share my sensitivity, read Carl Jung's little book called On the Psychology of the Transference. And then you will understand. In fact, that should be a standard tome for trippers. Understand the transference. Understand what it is, how to fight it, and this is psychic martial arts. Your psychic health will be immeasurably improved by understanding the dynamics of the transference, which is quite simple. The book is not that thick. Now to answer the lady's question, when I took Datura, I had reality distorting strange, and if I had been a personality of a different sort, I might have followed it deeper, but it appeared to me to be ambiguous and evil. Not evil, maybe evil. What happened to me was, this was in Nepal years and years ago. Nepali shamanism is based in part on Datura, the taking of the seed capsules. An English friend of mine who had the room next to mine took it, and I took it in my room. And it was a situation where to get to the facilities, I had to walk through his room. And he and I were friends, but we had a very slight rivalry going for the attention of a woman. And I think this woman was not aware that either of us was interested in her, but we were both aware that the other one was aware. And midway through my trip, I decided I had to go to the bathroom, and so I stepped through into this guy's room, and they were in bed together, having sex. And I guess I went outside, and then the next morning, after sleeping many hours, I encountered the guy, and I said, how was your trip? And he said, it was wonderful. And I said, yes, well, I saw. And he said, what did you see? And I said, well, I saw that you were with Julieta. And he said, I thought so too. But she wasn't there. And so, what conclusion do we draw from this? That this stuff is, I'll tell you what took me off it finally was about a week later, there seemed to be a rash of this Datura taking moving through the traveler community there in this little Nepali village where I lived. And about a week later, I was buying tomatoes in the market, and I encountered a different person, but this English friend of mine. And he told me he'd been taking a lot of Datura. And I said, oh, well, that's interesting. I took it. I don't think I'll be taking it again. And as the conversation developed, I realized he thought we were in his apartment. And we were not. We were in the market. And, this tells you it's time to dry out. Anyway, I use that as a springboard to different subjects. You were very patient. Next question?
I hope I can remember what my question is.
It's a test.
I agree that there's something sort of mysterious about where these psychedelic effects come from, and I refer again to the sort of classic psychedelic psilocybin, LSD. But the fact that you generally need to take a substance or a drug, it's a material thing, does, in some sense, sort of go in a strange way to reinforcing a pretty basic scientific, almost mechanistic view of the universe. And I just wondered if you had thought about that or have any comments.
Well, let me try to convince you otherwise. I mean, I see what you're saying. You're saying that because this transformative, possibly spiritual experience is causally connected to the act of taking a matter of a certain type into your body, that it seems to argue for the materialist proposition that mind is an epiphenomenon of the functioning of brain and so forth. Am I restating it right?
Well, yeah, sort of, but I wouldn't necessarily go so far as to say that it forces you to conclude that the mind is an epiphenomenon of the brain, but that there is some sort of real validity to chemistry, mathematics, physics, and that you talked about balkanization at this moment, that those things are in some sense far more real than, say, channeling, what did you say?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I mean, this relates to what I was saying about the balkanization of epistemology. It's really strange to me that science is in the act of flinging open the curtains on a staggering vision of what it is to be alive in this cosmos. I mean, we now can look back through the Hubble and other telescopes, 13 billion years to within 600 million years of the primary explosion that presumptively created this universe. Meanwhile, we're tearing open the nature of the human genome, the nature of the heart of the atom. This is the great age for the expansion of the scientific vision, but the population is somehow incapable of staying up with what's going on, and so we have the greatest proliferation of occultism in all forms since the 16th century. It's almost as though there's a bifurcation of the culture. The scientific, the makers of new science are going deeper and deeper in a direction that the rest of the public not only cannot follow them into, but is actually headed the other way. And it's a condemnation of our educational system, that people have not understood that science, for all its flaws, is the only tool for understanding the nature of reality that has any kind of track record whatsoever. The others just have a story to tell. The Buddha story, the Jesus story, fine stories, but that's all they have is a rap. The amazing, you see, why is science different? Somebody could just say, well, but isn't it just a rap? Well, it is, but it plays by slightly different rules than these other explanatory systems. Science is the only explanatory system where you get points for proving you're wrong. I mean, you form a hypothesis, you publish a paper, then you do further experiments. You discover your conclusions in paper A were completely wrong. You retract paper A and issue paper B, and your fellow scientists say, this guy does very good work. These are careful thinkers. You can bank on these people. They're not flaky. What religion operates like that? Can you imagine coming out of the ashram and having the guru say to his students, well, we managed to reduce that hypothesis to rubble in morning meditation, didn't we? So, and then let me return to answer that question based on my original misunderstanding of it. And I would say this, it is no reduction of the psychedelic experience to say that it is caused by drugs because they are material atomic systems and therefore we know all about them. Every electron is the yawning mouth of a wormhole that leads to quadrillions of higher dimensional universes that are completely beyond rational apprehension. Matter is not lacking in magic. Matter is magic. I mean, so when you hear these people like David Dennett and all these talk show materialists running around, these people haven't gotten the news that's coming out of quantum physics. I mean, you see, there's a problem, or let me describe to you the state of play here. The way science works is science respects fidelity of theory to experimental results. What really thrills a scientist is when you have a theory that makes a prediction down to 5 or 6 decimal points, and then you perform an experiment and it's spot on down to 5 or 6 decimal points. And then everybody involved in what's going on has extremely high confidence that they're on the right track. Well, now only one science is ever that good. Physics, macrophysics. Chemistry, it's good, but it's not that good. Ecology, biology, demography, these are pretty loose. They play with numbers, but it's a fig leaf. And by the time you get to sociology or something like that, I mean, these clowns have just snuck under the tent and should actually be shown the door and put back outside with the card readers. So for several hundred years, since, let's say, Galileo and serious physics, this is how science has been. It's been a pyramid of envy directed toward the paradigmatic science, which was physics, and which could produce this incredible congruence of theory and experimental data. Well, so then physics, of course, charges forward deeper into matter, asking deeper questions. Well, once you pass below the level of the electron, it's like suddenly, it's like smoking DMT or something. Absolute madness breaks out, where before you had these wonderful theories and they were feeding back this data. Now suddenly you have backward flowing time. You have particles which appear magically on one side of an energy barrier without apparently crossing through it. You have non-locality, which seems to imply that every particle that exists is somehow magically connected with every other particle. We now have quantum teleportation. We have black holes. We have singularities. And don't be fooled, folks. What is a singularity? It's just a place where you agree that the rules are canceled because you don't know what the hell else to do. And it's fine, It used to be in physics that they had one singularity. It was called the Big Bang. And so you say, well, one singularity, essentially what science is saying is give us one free miracle, and then we can run it from there. But the theory of special relativity then introduced the concept of black holes. And of course, black holes are enormous gravitational masses, so massive that neither light nor information can leave them. And what do black holes have at the center of them? Well, a singularity. Well, how many black holes are there in the universe? 10 high 14. That's a lot of singularities if you're trying to produce a theory without singularities. I mean, essentially, that's an admission of total intellectual defeat. My God, if there are 10 high 14 singularities, you're not even doing science. You just might as well be, channeling Atlantis or something. So, it troubles me because I think this stuff is rich. That physics is feeding back, and that ultimately a model of consciousness will come out of studying the deeper levels of the behavior of matter. But the conclusions are all going to support the non-scientific, non-rational factions. In other words, Bell non-locality is real. All matter in the universe is in contact with all other matter through some kind of higher space based on their original connectivity. Quantum teleportation is a possibility. These violations, backward flowing time, and violations of rational casuistry are all real. In other words, science, meaning physics at this point, prosecuted its agenda of deconstructing nature to the point where it let loose the elves of madness, paradox, contradiction, and peculiarity, and that can now never be put back. I mean, the dirty little secret is that at bedrock, the universe is more like a DMT flash than it is like an 18th century garden party, as we were previously assured by the practitioners of science. So I think that's enough ranting on that subject. If you want to ask a question, I guess what the consensus of the group is to go and stand, or I'll point to you. The reason we didn't originally say go and stand is because if you get a nut in the line, there's a certain fatedness to their eventually getting to the microphone, which if I am sensitive enough in the pointing out process could never happen. So this is we're trusting that you're
That's
saying.
why I got up here early.
Yeah, good, okay. Thanks for being patient.
Thanks, Terence. I had a technical question, but I think it's an interesting one and maybe important. Your name has become identified with the date 2012 because you have said that at a certain moment in the year 2012, an event will take place of tremendous or even infinite novelty. And this is based on your work on what you call the time wave and novelty theory and so on, which seems to indicate that around that date, something extraordinary will happen. And you confirm this by saying that, interestingly and synchronistically, perhaps, I'm not sure whether that's what you appeal to, but you say that the Mayan calendar also points to precisely the same date. And number 3, you say that at that time also an astronomical event will take place, namely the conjunction of the winter solstice with the galactic center, an event which only happens every 25,000 years, roughly 26,000 years. So the last time that happened, our ancestors were painting bison on the walls of caves. It's a long, long cycle, this precession of the equinoxes that brings the winter solstice around the circle of the zodiac every 26,000 years. And you say that this is going to happen again in the year 2012. What my question is concerned with is that third element, namely this precession of the equinoxes in the year 2012. As you know, the galactic center is not on the ecliptic, is not on the zodiac, but is a bit above it. And so the sun on the winter solstice will never be in conjunction with the galactic center. But an event that is linked with that, and I think far more precise and significant, is the fact that not in the year 2012, but right now, as we sit here, the winter solstice is moving into conjunction with the place where the galactic equator crosses the zodiac. This is happening now, 1998, 1999. And I'm wondering why you look to this year 2012 and the imprecise conjunction with the galactic center rather than the precise and remarkable return of the winter solstice to the galactic equator, where it was, again, 25,000 years ago when the cave paintings, when the first bursts of self-consciousness were occurring in our species. And I raise this not because I think or know that there's any truth to the meaning of this, but I do find it exquisitely beautiful that this is happening right now. I'm wondering what you think about that.
Well, thank you for framing and imparting an extremely intelligent question. I mean, you got it almost all right, and all the details right. And for those of you who have no idea what that was all about, I'm not sure I can help you. But for those of you who do know what that was all about, here's my response. First of all, your statement that the galactic center is now transiting the solstitial node rather than in 2012, that's the only part of the thing you laid out that I would galactic equator. Yeah, that I would disagree with, and here's why. When we say the galactic center, it turns out when you turn the lights on that concept that it's extremely slippery. The galaxy is not a basketball. It has a center of mass, which we can't determine from where we are because we're out on one limb edge of it. It has a center of luminosity. It has a volumetric center. I mean, how do you in fact even define what the galaxy is? Because at its outer edges, it feathers out into extragalactic space. Now, what we're arguing over here is a difference of 12 years. If we accept the premise that we're trying to locate a point in time where this conjunction of the galactic center and the heliacal rising of the solstitial sun occurs. Now, if you run out and buy a program to run on your PC like Voyager, and you look at these solstitial sunrises over the next 14 or 15 years, it actually depends on the program you buy, what the contention is that is supported. This is a deep subject, very interesting, raises issues of bioastronomy, archaeoastronomy, galactic dynamics, complicated issues. A book has come out in the last 6 months called Maya Cosmogenesis 2012 by John Major Jenkins. He's a fine scholar. I wrote an introduction to the book, but he, over hundreds of pages, can educate you and bring you up to speed about these issues. If the Maya had never existed, we would still be looking at the end of a millennium based on the Gregorian calendar. Now, we tend to say, well, you know, that the Gregorian calendar is out of sync with the Maya, that if there is a collective unconscious, then the European mind somehow made a sloppy download of it, because the Gregorian calendar is off-keyed the Mayan by 12 years. But on a scale of 1,000 years, that's a difference of 0.12% or something. And on a scale of 1 billion years, what is being off by 12 years? On a scale of 1 million years, what is being off by 12 years? So it seems crazy to me to have, violent factions for 2012, and then the point is that something, the galactic mind, the intelligence of the species, the integrated Gaian and galactic entelechy, something is trying to deliver a message. And it is writ large, this message, in our largest systems of defining and understanding time. We are at the end of a cosmic cycle. You can say 1,000 years if you're a Gregorianist, or you can say a 5,300x year cycle if you're a Mayanist, or you can say a 26,000 year cycle if you're a processionist. But the point is, we are there. We are there. We are in parking orbit around the eschaton. And, it permeates our lives. All you have to do is sit down, smoke a bomber, and look, and it's there. It is pregnant. We are pregnant with this eschatological breakthrough. And, people want it to arrive in the form of ships the size of Manitoba hovering over the Oval Office, perhaps offering oral sex, I'm not sure. But you see, we are such ephemeral creatures in time. We're like mayflies or something, mayflies who only live for 7 days. In other words, our temporal window of perception is so extreme. People say, well, nothing much ever seems to happen. Well, 100 years ago, there were no movies, automobiles, airplanes, telephones, internet, atom bombs, antibiotics, DNA, it's endless. So in the space of, and yet people say, well, nothing much ever seems to happen. An incredible ability to not register radical change seems to be a precondition of existing in the presence of radical change. Now, for those of you who care about my theories in this area of mathematics and deconstruction of the I Ching and analogizing to the Mayan calendar, it is a mathematical game. It is an intellectual game. I discern patterns in nature that cause me to believe that science, which I recently praised, has overlooked in very important aspects of reality that you don't need an atom smasher or a DNA sequencer or a probe to Ganymede to register. And what do I mean by that? Science has overlooked two aspects of nature that as you sit here, I believe you can hear my case and that you will find in my favor. Here's what it is. The first thing which science has not taken on board is the fact that as you get nearer and nearer the moment in time that we call the present, things become more and more complicated. Now that may seem like a trivial statement, but there's no reason for the universe to work like that. Why does the universe go from simple to complicated? Why do you get, at first, moments after the Big Bang, an ocean of free electrons at such a state of temperature and energy that no molecular bonds can form? Atomic systems can't even form because the bond strength is overwhelmed by the thermal energy in the system. Then it cools down and atoms condense, a more complicated thing than electrons by orders of magnitude. further cooling, further nuclear cooking of the most primitive elements, hydrogen and helium, in gravitationally aggregated masses called stars, cooks out the heavier elements. They emerge. They were never seen before until fusion began to occur in these hydrogen masses. And these fusion processes cook out iron, sulfur, carbon. Bingo! Carbon, molecules. Now, an order of magnitude in their complexity greater than atoms, as atoms are compared to electrons. And then, and I'm compressing 13 billion years of emergence here into 30 seconds, then out of the molecular soup you get long-chain polymers. Out of the long-chain polymers, you get molecular transcription systems, i.e. prebiotic stuff. Out of that, you get non-nucleated DNA. Out of that, nucleated DNA. Out of that, membranes, organelles, organisms, higher organisms, differentiation of tissue, our dear selves, culture, language, technology, and the eschaton.